Joined as always, Renee Washington. Guys, just because there hasn't been any union soccer doesn't mean we're not going to talk about some soccer here today. We had international plays, DOOPers around the world. We're going to look at some salaries. We want to talk about some salaries here today. So we got it all here for you. And of course, I have to welcome on in, fresh off of dancing from the tailgates, Renee Washington. Renee, what's going on?
Oh man. Yeah, I was dancing. Okay. I love the comments. I love the comment. Listen, Mexico knows how to tailgate. And it made me want to go to an international soccer game that much more. Like I've already had it on my bucket list. I want to go to a game in like Europe or something, because I always tell people, even though I haven't experienced it firsthand, just from watching how different it is, American soccer versus the rest of the world's football. And so being at the mixture of the Flyers home opener, the Phillies game, and then of course Mexico, Germany. Mexico literally ran the tailgates, had the best, hands down.
So what lots were they really in though?
Everywhere.
Really?
Everywhere. Every lot. It was Mexico. It was a huge takeover. From the moment, I mean, you saw from driving down with us, from the moment you started even driving in around Packer Ave, they were out and about selling shirts and gear and merchandise. And then the actual tailgates, nobody tailgates like this. Like Phillies fans, and you didn't even see Germany fans. You didn't even see as many Flyers fans. I hate to say it, but the Flyers game also started earlier, which is why, of course. So the Phillies fans had their small, little George Foreman type of grill. The Mexico fans had like the double tier, wide, like grills that like you see in your backyard.
Right.
They had air fryers. They were making ceviche, tacos, and pinatas. They had all burritos, all types of stuff. Just food everywhere. Dancing, music.
They never fail. And from what a lot of people don't know is I was Uber driver for Renee and Jamie, which was awesome. But being down there, like for me, it hit close to home because obviously growing up a Philly sports fan, growing up with the Latin culture, that's literally what it's like for Colombia matches. We have, I was asking, we were waiting at the light, and there was a lady selling shirts and hats, and I had to ask how much it was. It's just a crazy experience. It's a lot of fun. We witnessed a little bit of that a couple years ago with the Champions League with Club America, but I love seeing, you dancing in there. You got into the circle, dancing a little cumbia. The food is always spectacular. So hopefully, we can get some more international games. It's obviously big for growing the sport in our city, having these international games, having different fan bases. And to intertwine that with the World Series was really cool to see as well.
Yeah, and I mean, the greatest part was exactly that. It was so eye-opening for everybody. And listen, anywhere I hear music and see good food, count me in, because I love to dance. I love good food. So that's all I needed. But to see how they were just out in droves, and there were so many of them, all ages. They had their babies out there strapped on their back. They had the whole family, and we're wearing Mexican garb too.
Yeah.
So this is what the international break brings. It's an opportunity that you have two teams like Germany and Mexico playing here in Philly, for example. And for anybody that's out there, whether you're, going to the Phillies game, the Flyers game, or obviously going to the soccer game, it's such an eye-opening experience just to see how different it is and to see how they celebrate their culture, how they celebrate their teams, how they cheer for them. So I don't love the international breaks, to be honest. I'm one of the biggest ones that kind of, just complains, especially a time like this for the MLS with playoffs looming. It's decision day, Saturday. Playoffs are right around the corner, and you have your best players that are out traveling around the world representing their respective countries at a time that you really should be focusing on your club and focusing on your team. But after being a part of that experience, I will say, I do enjoy it a little bit more.
And when Memo Ochoa, the great Memo Ochoa, says that Mexico needs to play more matches in Philly because of the atmosphere, I mean, that says a lot about what it was there.
That's fantastic.
On Tuesday night. Yeah, it was absolutely great. And yes, the NLCS. I'm sorry, not the World Series, NLCS. But let's talk a little bit about
World Series is soon.
The World Series.
We're manifesting it.
Knock on wood. Knock on wood, Philly. But let's talk a little bit about the rest of international break. Obviously, we had our guys representing throughout the world. Shouts out to all of our players that were out there. We'll look at some of these guys here. Obviously, you kind of do start off here with our Jamaicans. Andre Blake and Damian Lowe. They didn't play in the first match against Grenada. That was a 4-1 victory. Shouts to Jamaica. But they did play in the Haiti win. Both of them played 90 minutes. So shouts to Andre and Damian throwing up for 90 minutes there.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's great that the Union have 8 different guys that are out, with Venezuela, with Jamaica, with the U.S. under 23s. for Damian Lowe and for Andre Blake, you know, you got to see Damian start and play all 90 minutes in the 3-2 win. Same with Andre, and then Andre just had a pair of saves, didn't have to do as much in that win over Haiti. But then both of them didn't dress in the next game, as you talk about, and now are looking for Jamaica to face Canada in the Nations League quarterfinals in November. So, you know, as much as we're talking about this international break, there's another one coming up very quickly in November with the quarterfinals. But, you know, I think the toughest part for the union when you look at the international break is a number of these guys, and it takes me right into Venezuela with Jose and Jesus. Guys aren't healthy. And this is something every club is facing right now. Don't get me wrong. They're literally on the same boat with this. But it's tough because this break should be a time, or could be a time to rest, maybe regroup. I know Jim said that for Jacob Glesnes, he did have time to rest, for example. They gave him a day off. But you want to get some more of those guys a day off. And someone like Andre and Jose, who are so pivotal for this group moving forward into the playoffs, tough to see. But we did see Jose gets to play, got an assist in the game for Venezuela in their 3-0 victory over Chile. Did not play in the 1-1 draw.
Yeah.
He's also been nursing an injury. So it's tough, JP.
Yeah, I do real quick want to shout out Venezuela. Like, people don't recognize Venezuela has always been a nation about baseball. All right. Soccer has always been the secondary sport. But they are knocking on the door of their first ever World Cup qualification. And if you have players like El Brujo and Jesus Bueno representing that, that's huge for our club. But yeah, we do definitely want to give that shout out. Jose did look really good against Chile. That was an interesting match because a Chilean midfielder, I forget his name, I think it was Perez, but he gets a red card like in the 13th minute, one of the quickest red cards in CONMEBOL history. And then so Venezuela took that momentum, scored 3 unanswered. Obviously, you don't like to hear Brujo, suffering another knock there. But that would be really cool to see Venezuela in a World Cup here in the United States, Canada, and Mexico. So that would definitely be really cool. But Venezuela played in a 4-3-3. El Brujo played as that central defensive midfielder. As many know, in a 4-3-3, there's a lot more freedom, a lot more flexibility. And as someone who's advocated for the union to play more in a 4-3-3, I'm not gonna lie to you, got a little giddy seeing that.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, look, the other part of this is you get to see what players look like with somebody else.
Yes.
I do enjoy that. Like, we always are seeing for Jose, you're seeing him in the mix in the midfield with, Jack and Ali. And okay, what does he look like when he's with Venezuela? And how does his talent that we see all the time transfer over into that? And for, just a quick shout out to our beat writer who put together an awesome article, Larry Henry Jr., who wrote this piece just outlining everything, in terms of union players on international duty. And in that also shared, as you're talking about the growth of Venezuela, sitting 4th in the World Cup qualifying table,
right
7 points across
Colombia.
4 matches. I mean, yeah. But it is great to see how we've continued to have, different nations improve.
Yes.
A team like Venezuela, not just a country known for baseball. Yeah. And Jose Martinez is a huge part of that. So shout out to him and for Venezuela for honestly being able to turn a corner as a team.
And speaking of which, speaking of players helping represent for countries that aren't really known for soccer, I mean, you look at Hungary as well. Hungary's doing a really good job. Gazdag in the last one against Lithuania on Saturday, he got himself 46 minutes there. He didn't play in the first one against Serbia.
Yeah.
But super dope seeing him there. Obviously, everyone talks about the upset against England last year. Gazdag scored a goal in that one. So, yeah, I mean, not only are these guys helping build a soccer culture, soccer community here in Philly, but they're helping their own nations as well. So it's really cool to see.
It is. And then also on top of that, to see the success is such a great part of just the confidence too.
Oh, yeah.
You think about going into, you had the international break, you step away, you're playing alongside your respective teams, you're scoring goals, you're getting assists, you're winning games, the pride of rocking your country's colors, your flag. I always enjoy, I've done some CONCACAF games on the youth level that I've been a broadcaster for. And it's so great to see the pure joy and excitement in everyone's faces when you hear your country's national anthem playing and you've got your pennant and your flag that you're waving and, everyone's standing and singing along with you. And it's emotional. It's a lot. Now, obviously, none of these men are out there crying. That's just, me doing that. But it is still a lot of pride that comes with that. So as much as it's frustrating on the more minutes, more physically, on the emotional side, it might also feel like a breath of fresh air to kind of like take a step back, play with your brothers, go represent your country, and then get back to the playoff push, and then get back to the MLS.
Bringing it back to Philly pride, though, like imagine like 2026, we have our World Cup. You're gonna have possibly former Union players, hopefully current Union players representing for their nation. I don't know about you, Renee, but that gets me excited as well. Seeing Doop Nation at the World Cup, that'd be really awesome to see.
Yeah, I mean, and it being here, it's like it's awesome. It's incredible to think about. Like, for as great as soccer's been growing over the last months, especially, it feels like we're only just skimming the surface.
Yes.
You know, there's so much more to come for the world game of more opportunities, exposure, you know, games, conversations, shows like ours, you know, just more that people are able to check out. So definitely make sure you're hitting that like button, subscribing, keeping up to date with what we've got going on, because we've got plenty to talk about today. Look, the international break was not a break at all in the sense of lack of topics to talk about. It was just a break from MLS games. But in terms of topics, we've got plenty of those. But also, not only were the older veterans getting things done, how about the youngsters, the homegrowns? The under 23 U.S. national team was represented well with a few Union players, Jack McGlynn, Nathan Harriel, and Brandon Craig, all across the roster for the U.S. men's national team under 23s. They had a 2-1 win over Mexico, and they each got solid minutes. Harriel and McGlynn each played 87 minutes actually combined, which is funny. Awesome. And then on the game against Japan, their minutes were 60 here and there. Brandon Craig, though, 79 logged minutes in the first one against Mexico, and then came off the bench in both matches, though, and had 30 minutes against Mexico and 49 against Japan. So a combined 79, I should say, for him, and a combined 87 for Harriel and McGlynn.
That was, really, I'm really happy to see, because I talked to Jim during the fantasy camp about Nate and Jack. Obviously, it's really hard to watch those matches, but from every indication from Jim, they did a solid job. They did what they had to do. Nothing, obviously, nothing out of the ordinary, but they did their job. The Brandon Craig one is obviously extremely interesting.
Yes.
I know you have some words to say, but for one, I've been banging on that Brandon Craig drum for over a year now. When I watch him out there, I've seen good stuff, but obviously I'm not a coach. I'm sitting behind a microphone, so I'm not the one to get the expertise per se. But when I watch Craig, I do see someone who's comfortable, who could play in this league. But and he's obviously getting call-ups by the under 23s. But it's weird. It's definitely weird.
Weird is a good word to describe it. I mean, there's so much young talent for the Union, and we've definitely been watching how they've picked and chosen and fit into the roster. You know, Jack McGlynn, a player that has become more of a possession player in the midfield for the Union and just kind of sits in and just fills in the gaps. And Nate Harriel, as an outside back, has been helpful. Mbaizo, who's been injured, we actually didn't even mention him, but he's been injured. He only played a total of 4 minutes in the game for Cameroon in their loss to Russia, did not play in the game against Senegal. He's been injured. Kai Wagner, of course, has been between the suspension and different things, hasn't always been out there. And Nate Harrell's been a player that's been able to step on the back line. Brandon Craig, though, has been a question mark. And, you know, I know many, like we talked about, weird, wondering what's going on there, wondering what is possible there. Yeah. But Jim Curtin had a really good point in talking to him earlier today, that he feels like Craig is a guy, as he was saying, that's too good for the Union 2 team. His talent he feels like it's not beneficial to play there, but not good enough to play with the Union on the back line. And obviously, there's a lot of talent there, to say the least.
For sure.
You're competing against, you know, Defensive Player of the Year. You're competing against Jack Elliott, who's been back there forever. Those two have complemented each other. Damian Lowe, who's that number 3 already, that if they're playing in a 3-back is locked in for that spot. If it's a 4-back and you need him to step in, can do that. So then where does Brandon Craig fit into all this? And that's the tough part. And we saw him down in Austin. I know people were asking, like, what is going on there? Are you going to bring him back? Yeah. What's that? He's not playing there. He's like awkwardly in between, where he doesn't fit in with a team right now. And it's just an odd situation overall, JP.
It definitely is really odd. From my understanding, down in Austin, Josh Wolf, who's the manager down there, coach down there, he's just very keen on his guys. He likes the center backs. He didn't want to change it. And Austin was one of the worst defensive teams in the league. I can't answer for that. I would assume maybe give the guy who came from the club that only develops great center backs, maybe give him a shot. Listen, I'm not an Austin, but it's tough here because you mentioned it. Glazis is here. Looks like he's going to be here for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Elliott also looks like he's going to be here for the foreseeable future. You still have Damian Lowe, who, listen, it's interchangeable with those guys. And then you also bring in Aloithu Miplenhilu. I'm sorry. We'll work on that. We'll work on that, Aloithu. So we did just sign him to the Under-22 initiative from South Africa. And from every indication, he looks pretty solid. So for Brandon, that leaves him with not many options. So it kind of sounds like for Brandon, it's like, you like Chicago. Do you like some of these bottom feeder teams? Because that's kind of like what Jim is kind of hinting at there.
Yep.
And we'll see if Ernst can get anything for him. It's just crazy to me because when you're talking about this league and the lack of defensive players in general, we don't have really quality center backs in this league. We have solid fullbacks, but center backs, it's not a lot there. So I would assume that some of these teams may want to take a waiver on a kid who's been in the union system for a while now, but we'll see.
Yeah, Jose Nunez, you're joining in saying you smell another loan next year. Martian, hello to you too also. Martian Lynch, nice to have you there. And Will.
Appreciate you, Martian.
Definitely drop in the chat what your thoughts are. I mean, it's a tricky situation. I know we were talking about it on the call today with Jim, and he was talking about he's talented. We all see that. He's young. He's got a lot of upswing, but there are so many good center backs in front of him. And that's a really tough position to be in because you don't rotate your center back. No. So I understand, as you're talking about down in Austin, the mentality, you're not sharing the roles of center back. You can split time in any position in soccer really, except your keeper and your center backs. And even your outside backs are pretty tricky, but I've seen some teams get away with splitting their outside backs minutes. So I think when you look at the bigger picture with Brandon, it is a hard situation because he's so young and you don't want him to just be planted on the bench and not ever have a chance to see what his potential is and see if he can be a top center back in the league. But on the other side, Jim's like, look, as a center back myself, with two of the best center backs in the league, how do I put him in? I know I was even asked today, like, do you bring him back in for the playoffs? And it's like, and play where? He can maybe be on the roster, and play where? So it is really, really hard that you have, for the center back role, that's your leaders, that's your generals. I know, Will, you're saying you're learning a lot more about the union in soccer.
Appreciate that, Will.
We love that because we are trying to make sure that we're reaching all different levels. And for anybody that's not aware of the center back role and kind of how you identify yourself on the team, you're usually the leader, the captain. You're someone that's used to playing every minute of the game for the most part. The only time center backs usually come out is if you're injured or you're making an absolutely terrible mistake. You're just having an off day. So that's why this Brandon Craig situation is so difficult because Brandon has talent. He does well with the U23s. He's too good for the Union too.
It's a weird
but
place
he's
to be
not good enough for Austin, and they're definitely not good enough for the Union. And like you're talking about, Jose, maybe there's opportunity there to use him in a loan or for some sort of capital in that sense. So I don't.
And obviously, the Union are more inclined to take advantage of that option, loaning out players. You've seen Andres Pereira this year. Maybe in the future, because the Union may not be getting what they would like per se for Brandon Craig, that could be an option as well, loaning him out to a different team in the league. And I hope nothing but and for Brandon too, like, keep your head up high. Like, you still have plenty of opportunities. You're still really young. He's got a lot of raw ability, and it's just about taking advantage of those opportunities when they do come for him.
Well, the other thing that's tough is this is why at a young age, and I'm not saying Brandon, this is not his fault or anything, at a young age for soccer especially, you preach versatility, but for any sport. Because in a situation like this, had Brandon been able to be a player that can also maybe play some outside back or play in the holding midfield, maybe there's opportunities for him to get minutes there. But his style of play is more conducive to be a center back. I know we were talking about that before the show of like his build, his style. He's a true center back. Yes. So it limits you because that's a role that you are locked into. And it's hard to come in and knock somebody off of that starting spot. Now, I've seen in some situations in my experience playing, but even in general, where sometimes someone like Brandon will come in and maybe if you can move Glasnes or Elliott into a different role, to get them all on the field.
Yeah.
Sometimes you would see coaches do that, but you can't do that here either. You know, that's something that's been tossed around in the past. Doesn't work. So it's right now the center back role is locked in. I mean, we were already talking about what do you do with Damian Lowe?
Yeah.
So now, Brandon, you're even lower on the totem pole, unfortunately, on the depth chart, I should say, because Damian Lowe is already knocking on the door, trying to get minutes as a center back and trying to show he's deserving of being a top center back for this team instead of that number 3 guy.
And real quick, Brandon, just look at the perfect example. Another Union homegrown who's playing, who got sold to Arsenal, Austin Trusty. That's a perfect example. He loses out his job. Mark McKenzie and Jack Elliott played great and made Trusty expendable. He goes to Colorado, plays really well, and he's had his opportunities now in the Premier League. And that is a prime example. You just got to take advantage of your opportunities, just like Austin Trusty did.
There you go.
Shout
That's
to
a
Trusty.
great point.
Miss you, man.
I mean, I know. I was like, gosh, that was some great defenders. You forget about someone like Mark. And yeah. But that's the thing. There's so much opportunity where it's, you know, if it doesn't make sense with the Union, as hard as that is to have that conversation, and I know there's been some of those hard conversations lately for the Union, Ollie, you know, there's always opportunity to play somewhere else. And that's okay, Kai. You know, whether it's because you're not good enough to get minutes or maybe because it's time to make a move and you feel like you've outgrown the team in a sense. So I think for Brandon Craig, he's in that same mix of kind of being stuck in between, as Jim talks about. And it's, to me, makes sense loaning him somewhere else, going to a different league, if that even is the better move, to make sure you're able to play. You don't want to be, and as someone retired, take advantage of the years you can play because it goes by very fast and all of a sudden you're on the other side and you're retired and washed. So, you know, if you're Brandon Craig right now and you're in the prime age and you're, you know, he's a tremendous center back, there's a home for you somewhere. And that's for certain. It just right now isn't, sadly, with the Union, it looks like. But there's also a home for you guys if you want to buy some sunglasses and check those out. Shady Rays is the place to do it. Now, it doesn't matter if it's summer, fall, winter, spring, whatever season it is, it's always a good time to rock some quality shades. And Shady Rays has sunglasses that are built to last, and our friends at Shady Rays have you covered so you can have premium polarized shades and some quick swap snow goggles that won't break the bank. Affordable, very feasible, makes sense for all the seasons, so it's seasonal. And it's something that you should definitely check out. So I want you guys to go check out when you have a chance Shady Rays. You can use the code PHLY to see their amazing deals for the season. And go to shadyrays.com. Use that code PHLY to get 50% off. It's on your screen. 50% off with that code. And you can check out, maybe you buy 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. Check out their shades. And also they have shades that have been rated very highly across the board by a lot of people. So 5 stars by over 250,000 people. The numbers don't lie. You can love your Shady Rays, exchange them for a new pair, return them for free. Whatever it is, Shady Rays always has you covered to make it easy, affordable, and seasonal, which we like too.
I'm definitely going to take advantage of that for sure.
Yeah. You know, I'm kind of like an interesting sunglasses person. I'm very particular.
I have a problem with them.
You have a problem? What's your problem?
I love sunglasses.
Oh, like an obsession.
Oh, yeah, I love sunglasses.
Oh, so
That's
you're
my
like,
problem.
nah, Shady Rays. Yeah, even if you lose or break yours, Shady Rays will repair them. So, like, I've terrible story really quickly. I had a pair of Ray-Bans that I decided to use in, like, back in college. I wore them to a party one time. Mm-hmm. Rookie mistake. Yep. Don't know where those Ray-Bans are to this day. Probably laying on, like, a frat house floor somewhere or something. And nobody replaced my Ray-Bans when I lost them. So, look, I don't do well with sunglasses. I either lose them, I drop them. So,
it's tough.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. But, you know, what else is tough is the U.S. men's national team having a tale of 2 games. And honestly, a tale of 2 halves, especially in that first game. Now, in the international break for the U.S. men's national team, and I know we do have Brendan Aronson, who represents. You know, we don't have current Union players that are actively representing on the U.S. men's national team in a meaningful way. But that's okay, because for the U.S. men's national team, they had a 3-1 loss to Germany. That was on last Saturday, and then turned around and on Tuesday, this past Tuesday, I should say, 1-0 against Ghana. A nice response back. And also you saw in that 3-1 loss on Saturday, they had a strong first half, had opportunities, weren't able to finish those opportunities. And you can't capitalize, even though Christian Pulisic had a beautiful goal.
Oh my God. That was a nice goal.
Germany did capitalize on their chances and were able to come back and rattle off 3 unanswered goals and win the game.
Why was the Germany match played in a college football stadium?
I don't ever like that.
I was just wondering, like, that was also the same exact pitch that Toronto played during COVID. And the Union actually lost there. So I have bad memories there for soccer. But I found that very interesting. They were playing at it's University of Connecticut.
Yeah, I almost went there actually. Connecticut has like a decent soccer field, but it's not as big, obviously, in terms of seating as the Rentschler field. But
I couldn't even pronounce that.
Rentschler is my guess. It's like Schler, I think is what it is. I don't know. And I'm not a huge fan of that. I know, like, I was even looking at like the Iowa women's basketball team had an exhibition game and they were playing in their football stadium. Like there was like a volleyball match that happened in Nebraska. Like it's a thing now that to have a place to have a full on exhibition game with more fans, you play in a football stadium. But the other option is to maybe just find a soccer stadium that can fit you.
But the Ghana match they played at Geodis, so why not find another MLS?
That's what I mean. Like there between the NWSL and the MLS, there are plenty of soccer specific stadiums that have the same amount of seats that you can find. You know, we're gone are the days of like you having to reach and play at Rentschler Field because you need to have more seats when you can just, I mean, in Connecticut, yeah, you could go to New England and play there. Although they play Gillette, actually. No, you can't go there. You can't go there. We don't like that either. That's not helping at all. Okay, maybe you don't go in the Northeast and you go just to another part of the country and play.
There's one in Chester, I heard. Chester, Pennsylvania. There
is one in Chester, Pennsylvania called Subaru. Oh my God, you could have played there. There are so many options for fields. You could have went to Red Bull Arena. We don't like Red Bull, and I don't even like that I have to wear red on the show today, but Phillies. You could have went to Red Bull Arena. Like there are stadiums that are beautiful, perfect soccer pitches, got the grass, got the lines, got everything you need. Yeah, but that's a whole other issue, I guess. Maybe I don't know what that's about, to be honest. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. The math's not mathing.
It's definitely not.
I will say I did enjoy the fact that the U.S. men's national team responded. They've been a team that we as soccer fans have struggled to wrap our heads around because every time you want to root for them and you think Greg Berhalter's got it figured out and you think Christian Pulisic and the rest of the team are going to take that next step and Gio Reyna and everyone, it's kind of like they disappoint you a little bit. But you know, I think the Ghana response was at least encouraging. Yeah. The first half was encouraging against Germany, and the Ghana response was encouraging.
Yeah, and I'll give this full disclosure here for everyone. I don't root for the U.S. men's national team, so I'm learning along with everyone else who's learning about soccer, about the U.S. men's national team. So I'm going to give you the perspective from the outside. When I watch this U.S. team, I love that front line. And if Berhalter is going to put the differences aside with Reyna, him at that 10 was really, really dazzling. You mix the speed with the creativity of Gio Reyna. I absolutely love that. And then when you get Balogun as your number 9, obviously that was a big win for the U.S. men's national team to be able to get him. It's really dope. Christian Pulisic as a wing, to me, I know he can play the 10, but I love him there as a wing because he's so versatile. And when you give him freedom, he's that kind of playmaker, which is crazy to think about as an American, thinking that he can be that type of playmaker. But that is what Christian Pulisic can absolutely be. I love Timothy Weah as well as a winger. That was the 4 against Ghana, and those guys put 4 goals past Ghana. Now Ghana it's not, and I don't want to bring up bad memories from my U.S. men's national fans, but it's not the 2010 team. It's a solid team, but they still have work to do. Yeah. And so the U.S. did their job. But my concern looking at this team is there's not a set center back duo for the United States. Tim Ream is going to be 38 years old come World Cup time, and that's probably your best center back. Yeah. Miles Robinson, really good, but coming off that injury is questionable. Chris Richards, I'm not too impressed with him. So the United States got to figure that out at that position because it got exposed. I mean, I remember watching that Netherlands match. I saw how they got exposed, how Netherlands exposed the United States. So I think that this is a really solid attacking team, but that defensive structure, something that we stress a lot here in Philly, they got to figure that out.
Well, Well, it's ironic because we talk about the union having too many good center backs. The U.S. men's national team could use one, but they're not American center backs. So I think it also is very telling of the development of U.S. soccer as a whole on the men's side.
Interesting, yeah.
Because you do see a very heavy, like, midfield forward type of a mindset. And coach, I know your son actually is dealing with this right now at the youth level. He's an attacker, but they're playing him at center back because he's also a good center back. And you see that a lot at the youth level in this country where coaches will put you at center back, but that's not your best position. So what they're doing essentially is you might be a really good midfielder or forward, but because you're tall, fast, aggressive, whatever it is, read the game well, they might put you at center back, and they're never taking time to properly groom a true center back.
Yeah.
So now that person, when they get to high school or college, and they're like, I was that person. I was a center back. I would play holding mid. And I didn't like defense. I'm more of a creator. So once I got older, it got to the point I was like, no, I want to be in the attack. I want to create goals.
Score the goals.
I want to get assists.
Celebrate.
I do. That's what I did. I was a goal scorer. So I got older and I didn't play center back. I didn't play defense at all. I was all in the attack. And then on the other side of it, you think about coaches not taking time to develop that center back.
That's huge. It's huge.
You are now stretched thin at that role because as you progress, everybody is a midfielder or forward, and you end up converting players. A lot of outside backs are typical flank forwards that they're playing an outside back. They're not players that grew up playing outside back. Center back is usually a person that's been a center mid, but as they progress, maybe they become more of that, like, sit back and watch. So the youth level needs to take time to actually develop defenders that now when you get to the men's national team specifically, you have options versus having all these creators, which we love, the creators and the goal scorers, and the front four is fantastic. But you also need to have a solid back line. And when you look at the youth, as you talk about with Chris Richards, Miles Robinson, you've got a weird dichotomy of like too old, too young, too experienced, and on the way out, and not enough experience. You need stability at center back. It's one of the most important roles on the field. Goalie, it's all down the middle. Goalie, center back, center mid. And if you don't have two solid, steady center backs, it doesn't matter how good your attackers are, it becomes a shootout.
It's so tough because obviously, when you're playing center back, you need a bunch of different things. You need to have the body size. You need to have the athletic ability. You need to be really disciplined. You need to have that killer instinct as well. I mean, there's going to be situations where you're going to be put in tough situations. How many times do we talk about, Glez is being blamed or Ellie being blamed for a goal because Mbaizo didn't communicate and they get put on the blame. It's definitely not easy, but I think for the US, they have to figure out that defensive structure. It's not just the center backs for me. It's also that team defense as a whole, like you see here in Philadelphia. Tyler Adams, I know he's really good at that.
Yes.
Especially as one of those holding defensive midfielders. And they really could use him as well. I think he's dealing with an injury. I didn't even see him in 18 for both matches. But once he's healthy, that's one that's definitely going to help with that. And obviously, I love Yunus Musa. I love his versatility, and that's definitely a great pairing with Tyler Adams as those two central defensive midfielders there in that 4-2-3-1.
Yeah, you've got options there in the attacking side. But a lot of coaches will talk about their defensive shape as an area that they want to make sure is organized and is consistent and steady. And defensively, you have to be, especially at this level, able to be on the same page where communication or not, whether it's verbal or not, you know what each other's tendencies are, you know where you're going, you know where you're forcing, you know how you're sliding, how you're helping. And so it is important to not only figure out what that defensive shape is, but to get those reps and that comfort together, that you have the chemistry as you step on the pitch to seamlessly move as a unit. So as you talk about, it's not just about locking in center backs. It's about having a group that can play together consistently, do well, and then also like a player like Dest who moves from right to left or, whatever it is, figure out where do guys work best? How do we move best as a machine and operate well together so that you can stop giving up a 3-1 loss to Germany and finally be able to beat them. So I know we've gone off the deep end here, but it is something to keep an eye on for the men's national team because obviously now after these two games, more to come up next as they are getting ready for November.
Oh yeah,
it'll be here before you know it. And for the quarterfinals for them, drawing Trinidad and Tobago in the CONCACAF Nations League quarterfinals, they've got the automatic Copa America qualification up for grabs with that. There's a lot that we are ready for in that clash of 2017 for the U.S. men's national team. So We'll see because definitely a good amount of question marks still for them.
Yeah, I mean, for them as well, you're looking at Nations League, you're looking at CONCACAF as a whole. Canada right now, I don't know what the heck's going on. Obviously, they have their own drama to deal with. But Mexico, with this new manager, seems like they're playing in a style that conduces their play a lot better. So we'll see how that works out for them. I definitely wouldn't sleep on Mexico. I know the United States have been enjoying the victories over Mexico over these past few years, but it's definitely something to look out for as we're nearing in 2023, 2026, or 2024 and 2026.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, let's talk about what else you can take advantage of, and that's DraftKings Sportsbook. Now, at DraftKings, you are able to win money instantly. We love winning money, guys. It's great to not only save money, but it's also to put more back into your pockets. So with DraftKings, if you download the app and you use that code PHLY that is on your screen, new customers can save $200 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on baseball, football, whatever it is that you're looking to bet on. It is Major League Baseball playoff time. Highly recommend you start betting on the Phillies in the NLCS because they absolutely can help you win some money. So it's only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code PHLY. The crown is yours. If you got a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problems gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, licensee partner Golden Nugget Lake Charles, you've got to be 21 plus. Age does vary by jurisdiction, though, and it's void in Ontario. You can see dkng.co/baseball for eligibility terms and responsible gaming resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions also apply.
Yeah, Renee knows ball. That's right. Renee does know ball.
Yes, Eugene Krabs. Welcome to Spiral Out, Eugene Krabs. Nice to have you guys here. Will, all of you guys in the chat, make sure you're liking, make sure you're commenting, joining the conversation. We've talked a lot about the international break, specifically looking at how Philadelphia Union players have done. We've also gotten into and dabbled with the U.S. men's national team as well, who are still figuring things out, as we talk about, especially on the defensive side. But there's been some other things that have been going on during this break. It's like a break time. You think it's a time to kick back, put your feet up, and relax.
Our sport does not sleep.
All. Not at all, JP.
No, not at all. So, of course, as well, besides what's been going on internationally, we also did have salaries drop. We have salaries to talk about. No, we're not talking about our salaries. You guys want to know about how much we're making. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the MLS salary. They did get updated yesterday. A lot of MLSers were on that phone, on that MacBook, looking at the updates. So I really want to give a big shout out to my dear buddy, Fabian Renkel. Please make sure you guys go follow him. He did us a solid of breaking it down, the top 10 salaries in Major League Soccer. This is guaranteed compensation in 2023. And would you be surprised, Renee, if I told you that Lionel Messi with $20.4 million as the guaranteed compensation? You know who was second? Lorenzo Insigne of the dumpster fire that is Toronto. He made $15.4 million this year. And then you look at the rest list. Shaqiri from Chicago made $8 million. Chicharito, who didn't finish out the season, $7.4 million. The other partner of Lorenzo Insigne, Federico Bernardeschi, was $6.2 million. Sebastian Drusi, $6 million. Hector Herrera, $5.2 million. Douglas Costa, $4.5 million. Wow. Wow. I just got to say wow at that one. Christian Benteke with $4.4 million. And Josef Martinez, Miami, with $4.3 million. Renee, you look at this list, the one thing that jumps out to me right off the bat is only one out of those 10 players is going to be playing in the playoffs. That's wild to me.
I thought you were going to say something different. So there's a lot of things that jump out to me. First of all, no surprise, as you mentioned, that Messi's the highest paid player in the league. We know. The league is, they know. Yeah, no.
It's
and
Messi
there's nothing to
league
argue
soccer
there.
now.
Yeah, and honestly, when you look at what Messi's done, you go on the MLS website, you go on anything, and they have their own streaming updates. Camera, you can pay to see just a solo camera that's literally following Messi around the field. You can subscribe to a Messi newsletter. The league is fully tapping into Messi mania. It's genius. I mean, you think tapping into Taylor Swift is genius for the NFL. Well, Messi's right there for soccer.
There was a shirt last night during the tailgates, a Messi Miami shirt. Shout out to Jimmy King for that one. He posted that on
That's
Twitter.
hilarious.
Outside
That's
Wells Fargo
hilarious.
Center, Messi pink in Philly during the craziness.
And I remember I was down in Florida actually during a time that Inter Miami was playing, and I was out at the Hard Rock, like having a drink and hanging with people, and all of a sudden a sea of pink comes in with all the Messi uniforms, and I saw whole families in Messi uniforms, like parents, their kids, their toddlers, all rocking Messi. Like it is fun. It's really fun to watch. It's honestly, it's hard because Messi's always been my favorite player. And obviously being that I talk about the union, you know, it's got to separate those two. But without a doubt, Messi deserving of getting that #1 spot. John Blaze, welcome into the chat. We're actually talking about soccer right now, but go Phillies, not D-backs. Go Phillies. Now, when you look across that list, it is remarkable to me that the highest paid players, as you mentioned, only one of the top 10 is in the playoffs. What does that mean for the league? I like, what does that say about the MLS? That the best players financially aren't on the best teams in terms of rankings. Like, in my opinion, does that mean you are spending your money better for those other teams? Could it be that you're doing like quantity over quality, which is usually the reverse? But in this case, you're spending, instead of like 20 million for Messi, you're going to get a couple of other guys for cheaper? Or does that mean that the other teams are just trying so hard to become a playoff team that they're just throwing all this money at their best players?
It's just so funny. You even look back to Beckham, to now all these big
Oh,
DP
gosh.
European players. These players do not guarantee you wins. What they are guaranteeing you is butts in seats, dollar signs for merchandise, and that's pretty much, maybe you're trending on Twitter for a little bit, but these type of players are not going to bring you wins. If you look at some of the teams that are competing for MLS Cup, Eastern Conference, Western Conference championships, these are teams that spend their money in the smart way. Look at the Union. They're one of the lowest payrolls in Major League Soccer. That's because they spend their money in the right way, and they also have a system that works. It works really well. But yeah, for all you MLS teams, like, it's cool seeing Messi wearing Miami. It is cool seeing the Italian brothers wearing Toronto. But if you want to win, because at the end of the day, if you don't win, you're going to hear from your fan base. And this is what MLS teams need to start thinking about. It's interesting. You're in a tough place in Philly because I do want us to spend more money, but you can see what the consequences can be if you spend way too much and if you don't spend it in the right ways. You're winding up with these players. You're selling shirts, but not putting wins.
Yeah, exactly that. I think it does. Okay, we also live in a world nowadays where it's all about clickbait and what's trending and what's popular. And it's a double-edged sword. I'm not a huge fan of like how we're in the social media instant gratification, like bring in the influencer type of a mindset. But that's essentially what some of these teams have done. And you even go back to Beckham. That's clearly way before this social media era really took off. But that's always been the mentality of, if you can't win in games, maybe you at least can get tickets sold and get people there. And now you're selling merch and you got people at least talking about your team, to hope that that will build an environment that will make other players want to come in and be a part of it. I don't know that that's always the case. Like, I don't know that every player, I'm a huge LeBron James fan, for example. Not everybody in the NBA wants to play with LeBron James. Kyrie Irving's a great example. And why? Because a Messi, a LeBron, a Martinez, Beckham, whoever it is you're talking about, they bring a lot with them.
They do.
The ball's at their feet a lot more in terms of soccer, obviously. You know, a lot runs through them. The team is run through them. It's built around them. And not everybody wants that. Not everybody wants to be the number 2 or 3. They want to be Batman. They don't always want to be Robin. So I do think it's tough because, yes, you might bring in more fans, but you might not always guarantee bringing in other players that want to play with them. I think everybody wants to play with Messi in some capacity, but if you have to choose between also playing with Messi or beating Messi, like as a competitor, that's the other side of it. I'd rather go maybe play with somebody else and we're beating Messi, and now I'm having that iconic moment versus I'm always just robbing Batman over there and following in his shadow. So I do think there's so many other trade-offs. Now, here's an interesting point. Top 3 teams in the East right now. I didn't do the West. This is just for the East. Top 3 teams in the East as of this moment: Cincinnati, Orlando City, and the Union, of course. You want to know where the first player falls? If you want to guess a number, where the first player from those 3 teams falls in the salary range?
I'm gonna go 3 mil.
Okay, wait, I'm sorry. Well, actually, that helps too. But no, that's wrong. The first player, so that's the top 3 teams in the East.
I'm gonna say it's Acosta. Luciano Costa. No?
No.
Okay.
Is it Karol Swiderski? Yes.
Okay.
For Charlotte, number 25 in the rankings
Okay.
with 2,000. 2 million. It's 22.58. That's a lot. I don't even know how to read these big numbers because I don't even know, like, what is 2,258,000? I do know these numbers. I'm lying. I'm a mathematician too. Just kidding. So, from the top 3 teams in the East, I had to scroll down to number 25 before I got to a single player on any of their rosters. There's nobody from Orlando City hired, nobody from the Union hired. The first player was Charlotte, who just won the Shield. Shield winners.
Cincinnati, yeah.
I'm sorry. Oh my gosh. Oh wait, I'm sorry. I'm in the wrong team. My bad. Listen, guys, it's been a long day. So even worse. That makes it even worse. I'm sorry. Bear with me here, guys. Let me keep scrolling then, because that's why you were looking at me confused, like I was crazy. It's not 25. It took me until I got to, let's just act like I never said any of that. It took me until I got to number 26, 7, 8. 28. It is Acosta. You were right, actually. Acosta of Cincinnati is on a Shield winning team, making $2 million and sitting at number 28 in the salary.
And he might win. He probably is going to win the MVP.
MVP, best team in the league.
That's wild.
A team that is a favorite to win it all.
Mm-hmm.
And he's number 28. And again, Orlando, the Union, and for Cincinnati, not a single player higher than 28 on that list. And these are the top 3 teams in the East and the top teams in the whole league in terms of actual standings. So when you talk about where you're spending your money, how you're spending your money, you have Columbus Crew up there and the Revolution, and Inter Miami's got a lot, obviously, and Houston Dynamo and LA Galaxy and Chicago Fire. But it takes you until the 28th player to get to someone that's on the top 3 team. I didn't do the whole league because obviously we know for the West, LAFC spends money, so they kind of mess up that our whole point that we're making here. But yeah, it just feeds into exactly what we're talking about, that the best teams aren't necessarily just spending millions and millions of dollars. It's a divide across their roster that they're paying less but getting more.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we're talking about players right now, and obviously you're going to need some merchandise for some of these players. Well, ladies and gentlemen, why don't you check out one of our dear friends, our dear sponsors, FOCO. They are the leading manufacturer of sports and entertainment merchandise with a product line that includes apparel, accessories, toys, collectibles, novelty items, and more, ladies and gentlemen. And right now, when you use our promo code PHLY, you get 10% off. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you guys take advantage of this deal. You don't want to miss out on it. Get your merchandise. Guys, obviously, Red October is here. We're going to be in Blue November before you know it. Birds are killing it as well, so make sure you guys gear up on all your memorabilia. But I want to go over real quick, really. Our team, our top 5 salaries. All right, very interesting as well.
Yeah, because you got to do some scrolling to get to them. They're not high up on this list. You got to scroll for a little while before you finally get to a Philadelphia Union player.
That is true. So number 1 is Michael Urre. He's making 1.7 mil. Number 2, the Gazdag with 1.2 mil. Number 3, Julian Carranza with 950,000. Man, this is scoring goals and making 950K. Glezis with 900K. And then our captain, who we've talked about plenty, Ali Bedoya, leaving Philly with 780K. That's the top 5 right there. That's crazy. It's crazy. They're some of the best players at their positions, and they're making at most 1.7 million. And it just goes to show the plan that the Union put in place and how well it is working. Now, how far can we go? Obviously, we have to answer that at the end of the season. But it is proven that if you have a good structure, you have a proven plan, you don't have to spend $20.4 million on Lionel Messi. You can have a good team with a payroll that's probably a third or half of that.
And honestly, okay, at first glance, when I looked at these numbers, I was very, very much surprised. And my initial thought was to look through at all of the Union players and find where they are. And obviously, you have to do some scrolling before you get there. But then as I started really factoring in how the other teams have been spending their money, it actually does make me kind of feel better. Yes, I agree you should find a way to pay Kai Wagner. But then on the other side of that, now while you were reading, I was doing another deeper dive into looking at the West.
Yeah.
And for the top 3 teams right now in St. Louis, LAFC, and Seattle, they do have 1 or 2 that are in that top 28. So again, the theory still remains the same, that across the top like 30, you might have 2 players that are representing the East, 2 players that are representing the top teams in the West. So it's not just the Philadelphia Union. You know, Cincinnati's not paying much. Orlando City's not paying much. The Union are not paying much. LAFC, surprisingly enough, is not paying as much either. It's Carlos Vela.
This year.
Yeah, it's like you by no surprise. And then even for Seattle and for St. Louis, they're not paying as much. So weirdly enough, and ironically enough maybe, across the list of clubs that each player is representing for these highest millions and millions and millions of dollars that they're getting paid, it's teams that are further down the rankings. You know, it's that, look, Chicago has players in the mix, and, you know, LA Galaxy has players in the mix, and they're the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah.
So are we wrong when we say pay Kai Wagner? Or is it maybe that these top teams are onto something a little bit more of, I know we talk a lot about the homegrowns and that being really a big emphasis for the Union, but it seems as though something is actually working here. The Union have consistently been a top team in the league over the last years. And Jim Curtin has mentioned that. He's like, people have been talking about how we've underperformed. We feel like we're underperforming with all the draws that we've had and inability to get wins down the stretch. But when you look in the last 6 seasons, we've been at the top of the league in goals, in standings, in a lot of areas. And so we're just being harder on ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, obviously the pay Kai thing is so complicated, right? Because we talked about it in one of our episodes. I think the highest paid fullback in this league right now is Richie Laryea, who's playing for Vancouver. And that's 1.1 mil. And Kai right now is making like 650K this year. And that's just a tough part. Like, do you break the record for a team that notoriously doesn't spend a lot of money, as we clearly just went over? And so that is always going to be the tough part. But I mean, yeah, these teams just constantly just dishing out money. And like, I look at it, and honestly, Renee, it's the same culprits too. I mean, Miami right now, obviously, I think they're going to be a juggernaut next year. And obviously, when you get one of the best players, probably the best player of all time, it helps out. But LA Galaxy are back in this list. The Chicago Fire are back in this list. The DC United are back in this list as well. These are constant culprits of overspending on a lot of these players. And it's crazy that these teams can still get away with that. I even look at like LA Galaxy, like this at one point was the team.
Yes,
they
were.
This was the Yankees of MLS. And now they can't even keep up with this own team in their own town.
Exactly.
And LAFC, St. Louis, and Seattle spending decent amount of money, but again, all players that are fitting the system that they're trying to create, the identity that they want for their teams. And that's why it's working out so well too for those teams.
It is remarkable when you look at the fact that, you know, across the players that are making over $1 million, it's still not a lot of players that are in the top 3 of their respective conference. So I'm just, you know, when you really scroll through and break down the numbers, and we can get into this more at a later time, when you really break down the numbers of even guys making more than $1 million. So we looked at the top 25 and we didn't find anybody from the East, the top 3 teams in the East. It took until the number 28. But when you look across everybody making over $1 million, the top teams have 1 or 2. They do have a couple here and there that they have paid over $1 million. But as you mentioned, it's a lot of those clubs that are at the bottom of the rankings that are not even, I mean, as we get into Decision Day this week, and we'll talk more about Decision Day in our show tomorrow for Friday's preview of the Saturday matches, it's teams that come Decision Day, they're just like, this is our final game of the season. Let's end on a high note. Adios, because it's it for them. There's nothing to play for on Decision Day except maybe a chance to play spoiler or at least get some, get a result in your final outing. So overall, with the conversation, and I know we've talked about it with Ali Bedoya on the show, we've talked about it around Kai Wagner's news breaking. Is it that teams should be paying more money to keep some of these better players? Or is it maybe that the league has found a way to be kind of cheap and successful with that. And understanding that you're going to lose players to the Premier League or Champions League or wherever else, but you're going to still keep a good, solid level of talent, that it's competitive. It's, there's no clear favorite. It really, even like this season, a good example, Cincinnati wins the Shield, but there's nobody you can clearly say is going to go into the MLS Cup and just walk into it, and it's wide open. So I don't know. It's a matter of what the league, I guess, wants to be defined as. But right now, it seems like there's a weird double-edged sort of like, yes, pay more people, but also maybe don't pay more people, because it doesn't always equate to wins.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, we're talking about playoffs, and you obviously are going to want to watch those playoffs, especially here at Subaru Park. Well, ladies and gentlemen, right now we are proudly sponsored by Game Time. And of course, any last-second tickets, guys, World Series, NFL, you name it, make sure you guys are using the Game Time app for all of your last-second ticket buying. Definitely make sure you guys check them out. And right now, with the promo code PHLY, you get $20 off if you're a first-time user. So make sure you guys are a first-time user. So make sure you guys check that out. I'm definitely going to be trying to use that up here, as now we're gearing into hockey and basketball season. I'm looking forward to taking advantage of the Game Time app, and you guys should as well. My last point on this, Renee, I'm curious how these salaries will change if the rumors are true. They're going to alleviate some of the roster restrictions, some of the salary cap restrictions. How will that look going forward here? And more importantly, how will that look for our team? We're talking about PHLY. Does that open that up now? The Uni finally spend some dough. Carranza, listen, I'm 92% sure he's gone after this year. How are you going to replace him as well? And I'm hoping that some of these roster restrictions, salary cap restrictions, can help the Union build some teams. What's up, Raynell? What's going on?
Yes, Raynell, Eugene, everybody that's in the chat, continue to subscribe, hit that like button, let us know your thoughts. It's definitely interesting to see how all these conversations have come out around money. It is also interesting, the timing of it, with it being so close. I mean, decision day's on Saturday. The regular season's wrapping up. We already have some teams that have clinched and know who they're playing, but there's still some teams that are either trying to get in or also just trying to still play for seeding, trying to secure a home game. There's a lot up for grabs. And here comes the discussion about money. As you talk about, a lot up for grabs. There's a lot of money that people wish was up for grabs. It's just a weird timing for all these things, because on top of that, you've got the international break. You've got a time where players are leaving their clubs to go play with and represent their countries. So I don't love the fact that we're even having these conversations about money at this time, where the focus should be on playoffs. But everybody's doing it. Yeah. You can't, as a player, it's like if your company was to drop the salaries of you and your colleagues, you mean to tell me you're not going to go look? You want to see what you're making in comparison to other people and how it stacks up. And right now, if I'm looking at this as a player, I'm doing exactly like we did. Okay, you're not even in the playoffs. You might be getting paid more than me, but you're not in the playoffs. Or maybe I need to be looking a little different in terms of the conversations that I'm having. And some people might be focused on the money. Some people might be focused on winning hardware. Depending on what your priorities are, you might be looking at this excited or ready to go have a conversation with your front office.
Or how about like a player, like for example, like a Dallas player starts looking at this and he hears the hashtag PHLY, and they're like, well, yeah, maybe
hashtag pay me too. Pay me too, because I'm not making much money either. It's not just Kai Wagner that's getting shorted. On this list, there's a lot of names that are very low. We talk about MVP candidates, players, front runners for the MVP, that are not even in the top 25 of the league in terms of salary. Yeah, it seems like we need to get a lot more hashtags going than just pay Kai Wagner, because the league as a whole needs to reevaluate how the pay structure is. I don't know. I'm not an expert on pay. Listen, I'll be honest, I'm not one that overly pays attention to everybody's salaries across every league and contracts and things like that.
Philadelphia does,
pretty
for sure.
Typically, the better players are the ones getting paid the most money.
For sure.
And it seems like the MLS somehow has that, these are great players. I mean, Messi's the best player, don't get me wrong. But in terms of like how your team is actually doing, the better your team does, the more you get paid. Not always the case in the MLS.
I think with the popularity continuing, because like I think like what you don't want is like the NBA, where like you look at James Harden, like he can now like force his way out of a city.
Yeah.
Like that's where you don't want to get. But with the popularity of this league and the sport as a whole, there is going to be more money, and also there's going to be more of a clamor, because like, look, we have the access now. But now if more eyes get access to this, noise starts getting created, and ownership starts feeling the pressure.
Yeah, the best way to address the elephant in the room is to talk about it. You cannot continue to tiptoe around these conversations around pay. Money is a really awkward thing to talk about, but it's a great point you're bringing, that seeing these in order, you can organize it by whatever you want, by club, by base salary, by compensation, by last name, first name, that you can literally go through this list and take a deep dive into it. And now you have to have these conversations. If I'm in the front office somewhere, I'm having these conversations like, all right, JP, here's where we are. Here's where the other teams are. Here's what we maybe should be looking to do differently, because this is a way to kind of like, let's take the blindfold off. Let's take a look at it for what it is and figure out how you can make sure you're paying your players what they deserve to be paid. So now when they step on the pitch, they feel valued. They feel like you understand their worth, and they're going to go out and perform at a higher level knowing they're getting the checks that they deserve. So definitely something that, as we continue to keep an eye on, decision day and playoffs will only make those types of analysis that much more interesting.
Yeah.
But we've got more to talk about, of course, in our Friday show, JP. We'll be talking about Decision Day. We'll be previewing the game for the Union as their final regular season game. Everybody playing on Saturday at the same time, and shaking out how the playoff seeding is going to be, what that final picture looks like, who gets home game, who's playing who. So it's only going to get more exciting here for us on PHLY Union Podcast.
Friday football, not football Friday. Friday football. There you go.
There you go.
Only here, ladies and gentlemen.
So thank you, as always, for tuning in. Make sure you're liking, subscribing, checking out all of our content that we're dropping along social media, along our podcast platforms. We're bringing you shows each week. We also have Larry, who's contributing articles that you can check out and does a great job of writing pieces, whether it's about our players with the Union or how they're representing on their international duties and much more. So as always, follow us at PHLY_Union across Twitter and on everything social media at PHLY_sports, as we've got more to dive into Friday, previewing the Union versus the New England Revolution. Ooh. Have a good one, guys.
Doop. We all silly like the mayor.